Hello friends and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with a story where OP encounters two unsupervised young children playing on their porch. Concerned for their safety and surprised by their behavior, like trying to enter OP's home without permission, OP calls the non-emergency police line. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Called the cops on my neighbor's kids. I heard kids playing on my porch, so I told my kids to get their socks and shoes on because it sounded like their friends were outside playing already. My daughter opens the door and two very small children jump off my porch and run towards the road, which made me nervous right off the bat because they were so small, 3-year-old male and 4-year-old female. But they stopped and came back when they saw it was just my kids, and I realized that these were two kids that I'd not seen before at all in the neighborhood, and there was no adult in sight supervising them. I tried to ask them where they lived, where their grown-up was, and if I could walk them home, but the boy kept yelling at me that he knows where he lives, at the mountain. This doesn't make sense. We live 2 hours away from the closest mountain, but he's also around 3. So I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. 2 cops showed up about 20 minutes later and found the mom about 10 houses down. She kept glaring at me as the cop was talking to her. When they left, she meekly starts calling her kids who are just straight up ignoring her, and I said, "I don't think that's going to work. I think you need to come get them." She glared at me again and took 10 minutes to wrangle up her kids and go home. I'm not sure if this paragraph is going to add any context or if it's just going to make me feel better to type it out because it was weird, but here it goes. The little girl wouldn't talk to me at all, probably shy, but the little boy was weirdly demanding and disrespectful, even for a 3-year-old. He told me to get him water, and I did, to which he screamed at me for not bringing him a big bottle of water. Then at one point, when I was waiting for the cops, he told me that he was going in my house to get more toys to bring out, and I told him, "No, you're not," and he straight up looked me in the eye and said, "Yes, I am," and was going to just walk in my house. I don't know if this is just offhanded weirdness or if maybe these kids are just allowed to do whatever they want in their house. It honestly just kind of floored me because my kids would never talk to me that way, let alone a strange adult. He also told the cop that he ran away because he felt like it. Anyway, when I told my best friend and mom, they agreed with what I did, but when I told my boyfriend, he brought up that the lady might have been glaring at me because they might not be fully legal here, and I may have put them on blast. I'm definitely not trying to get anybody deported, but I'm also not trying to babysit 2 small unknown children for free all day. Your boyfriend sounds like he's more concerned with not ruffling feathers than making sure those kids were safe. And our second story. Taking 2 parking spaces not today. So at my last workplace, we had a shared parking lot for the 6 or so companies that worked on the property. Sadly, the amount of parking spaces on the terrain wasn't suitable for the amount of people that arrived by car. This meant that if it arrived late, you were out of luck and had to park off property, meaning you had to have a 3-minute or so walk to get to the building. The day this incident took place was a rainy day, which probably caused the not today attitude, and when I drove onto the parking lot, there was 1 spot left, but not really. The person next to the spot had parked his car over the line dividing the 2 parking spaces, basically taking up 2 parking spots. I looked at the car, I looked at the weather, and I looked at my own car. My own car was a small Volkswagen and was around 127 years old and looked like it was the sole survivor, albeit just of a destruction derby. Okay, you got nothing to lose, just don't hit the car. I might have actually said that out loud in my car. I made the decision to not go for the 3-minute walk, and that space left was enough for my car to fit in. It was, barely. I think I've done the best parking I've ever done in that moment because I managed to fit my car right next to the other car, and by just, I mean I had to turn the rear view mirror on the right side in just so it wouldn't hit the car I parked next to. I think I left the generous space of 3 centimeters, approximately 1.2 inches, between our cars, which allowed me just enough room on the other side to get out on my driver's side. I had to squeeze it all, but I managed. Now, the good thing about my work spot was that I had an overview of the parking lot and was always one of the later leavers. I didn't know whose car it was that parked like a jerk, but I knew I'd find out that day, and I did. Apparently, the car was from a client of one of the other companies who happened to leave about 3 hours after I parked my car. When I say, I mean wanted to leave, he came out of the building and walked up to his car only to stop around 2 meters from it. Odd how people tend to notice stuff like this when they're close. He walked closer to see if my car had hit his car. I hadn't, and stepped back again. He looked back to the building and back to his car again. There was no way he was going to get into his car the normal way. It was satisfying to see him consider all options, and I think he briefly considered coming back into the building to ask whose car was parked next to him, since he took a step or two back towards the building, but then decided there was no other option than to get in from the passenger side. Yeah, you don't look so fancy in your three-piece suit trying to get over to the driver's side while avoiding to have your virginity taken by the handbrake/gear shift. That'll teach you proper parking, I hope. Sometimes I miss having a small car just for situations like that. And our last story. Neighbor keeps calling police about my car parked on the street. I've been living in my neighborhood for about 4 years now, and it's generally a quiet, peaceful place. Recently, though, I've been dealing with a frustrating situation involving my car and one of my neighbors. I drive a late 90s Acura that I bought for $400 as a temporary beater to get me through the winter while I fix up my Subaru WRX, which is stored safely in my garage. The Acura isn't the prettiest car on the block, but it's reliable and gets me where I need to go. About a month and a half ago, I started noticing warnings on my windshield for street parking violations, and I'd see chalk marks on my tires. The city ordinance here states that you can't park on the street for more than 24 hours without moving your vehicle. However, I drive my Acura every day to work, to run errands, everywhere. I haven't received any actual citations, just warnings and notes from the police department. I'm pretty sure I know who's behind the complaints, an elderly couple who live a few houses down on the other side of the street. They have a history of playing neighborhood police. When I first moved in, they called the authorities about my cars because they didn't recognize them. I suspect they don't like the look of my Acura since it's a bit rough around the edges. Last night, I got home from a long day at work around 7 p.m. This morning, I left for work at 9:30 a.m. When I got to my car, I found yet another warning from the police. It was getting old. One day, I woke up and couldn't find my car at all. Panicked, I called the police to report it stolen, only to find out that it had been towed. Apparently, someone had reported it as an abandoned vehicle and the city had it removed. I was furious. I decided to call the police department and spoke with the officer who had responded to the latest complaint. She was very understanding. Look, she said, I can tell you're using the car regularly. I see the tire tracks in the snow, the chalk marks are gone, or sometimes the car isn't even here. Honestly, I don't see what the problem is. Then why do I keep getting these warnings, I asked. Whenever we receive a complaint, we're obligated to follow up, she explained. Your neighbors are claiming that the car hasn't moved in over a week. But that's not true. I drive it every day. I believe you, she said sympathetically. Unfortunately, unless they're making a false report, there's not much we can do. But you haven't received any tickets because we can see the car is being used. Frustrated, I asked, isn't repeatedly filing false complaints a problem? She sighed, it can be, but proving that they're intentionally making false reports is difficult. My advice? Maybe have a conversation with them. I decided she was right. That evening, I walked over to their house and knocked on the door. The elderly man, let's call him Mr. Thompson, opened it. Hello, Mr. Thompson, I began politely. I was hoping to talk to you about my car. He frowned. What about it? I've noticed the police have been coming by a lot, and I have a feeling it's because of complaints about my Acura. I just wanted to assure you that I drive it every day and it's legally parked. He crossed his arms. That car's an eyesore. It's bringing down the neighborhood. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, trying to stay calm. But it's my temporary car while I fix up my Subaru. It's registered, insured, and I make sure to follow all parking regulations. He huffed. Can't you park it somewhere else? Maybe keep it in your driveway? My driveway is currently occupied, and the street is public parking, I replied. I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding." His wife appeared behind him. "That car hasn't moved in weeks," she insisted. "Actually, I drive it daily," I corrected her. "Perhaps you haven't noticed because of my work schedule." They looked at each other, and Mr. Thompson muttered, "Well, it still looks abandoned." I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere with them. "I understand your concerns," I said, "but unless I'm violating any laws, I have the right to park there." I turned to leave, hearing them grumble as I walked away. After our conversation didn't resolve anything, I decided to take another approach. I wrote a polite letter explaining the situation, including my contact information, and dropped it off at the houses on my street. In the letter, I mentioned that if anyone had concerns about my car or anything else, they could reach out to me directly. A few days later, I received a note in my mailbox from another neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. She wrote, "Dear OP, thank you for your letter. I wanted to let you know that I appreciate your efforts to communicate. I also wanted to inform you that the Thompsons have been causing issues with several neighbors regarding minor things. You're not alone. Best regards, Mrs. Jenkins." I decided to attend the next neighborhood association meeting. There, I met more of my neighbors and brought up the issue in a respectful manner. "Has anyone else been experiencing problems with unnecessary complaints?" I asked. Several hands went up. People shared their stories of the Thompsons calling authorities over trivial matters. Collectively, we decided to address the issue as a community. We drafted a petition to present to the local police department, highlighting the pattern of unfounded complaints from the Thompsons. We also requested that the police verify the validity of complaints before taking action. A week later, the officer reached out to me. "Good news," she said. "We reviewed the situation and noticed the pattern of complaints from your neighbors. While we have to respond to calls, we'll now be cross-referencing complaints for validity. Also, the Thompsons have been cautioned about making false reports." Since then, the unwarranted warnings have stopped. The Thompsons seem to avoid me, but other neighbors have been friendlier than ever. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.